Shall we start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon to everyone. On behalf of CIPS Pakistan, I would like to welcome you all and thank you for taking time out to join us today. Today's webinar, Optimizing Supply Chain with Triple Bottom Line, is organized by CIPS Pakistan. The objective of the webinar is to discuss how the concept of the triple bottom line is very important for all the stakeholders in the company, and this includes everyone that is involved in the business, whether directly or indirectly, as well as the planet we are living on. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Amir Aziz, your host for today's webinar. Along with me is my colleague, Mr. Akbar Manzoor, who is the moderator for today's event, and he will take you through question and answer part. We both are members of CIPS Pakistan branch. Before I introduce the speakers, could I please request everyone to turn off their mics and videos to avoid any unnecessary distraction. The question and answer session will be held at the end of the session, so please keep your questions coming. Important is please send your question in question and answer section only and not the chat section. If you send your question in the chat section, the chances are the questions will not be picked. So it is very important that you send your questions in the question and answer section at the bottom of the screen. We will try to cover as many questions as possible and answer them. However, sincere apologize if due to time constraint we cannot pick up your question and answer it. I would now introduce you to our speaker for today's session. We have with us is Mr. Mohammed Sikandar. Mr. Sikandar is a chartered MSIPS and a procurement and supply chain expert with a versatile experience. He's managed engineering, operations, drilling, subsurface and exploration segments for over 8 years across oil and gas industry. He started his career in supply chain after successfully completing BSc Honors Economics and Maths from LUMS and subsequently MBA from IBA. Our second speaker is Mr. Salman Ahmed Khan. He's having an engineering background. He's done Masters of Engineering in Industrial Automation. He's got a versatile experience of handling plant operation engineering in material management, procurement, and space management. His major skills are value engineering, material requisition planning to support supply chain for industrial operations, and along with IT experts in SAP materials management. He has previously been associated with Pakistan top leading tire manufacturing and pharma industry and currently associated with Amreli Sales and working as assistant manager space and planning. The speakers will talk about the importance of planet, people and profit in today's webinar. People and planet will be covered by Mr. Sikandar. Profit aspect through inventory management will be covered by Mr. Salman. I will now hand over to Mr. Sikandar to take us through people and planet. So over to you, Mr. Sikandar.
Thank you, Amir. Let me share my presentation first.
Yeah.
So, is it visible now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can see.
So, first of all, thank you very much to the entire audience for giving me an opportunity to speak on the triple bottom line approach. And as you know, that COVID-19 has surely tested entire global supply chains in some way or another. Those supply chains, if I were to be specific, who have been more responsive, who have been doing their basic groundwork effectively, have managed to handle COVID-19 situation quite well. So in my opinion, this tenure has clearly highlighted an important aspect that why TBL as an approach is becoming increasingly significant for many businesses around the globe if they are not in true spirit implementing this approach. So I will be covering the high level aspects of what exactly is TBL, and for some of the audience who are not very well aware of it, and what are the underlying feature, what can businesses around the globe can do to make sure they capitalize on this most interesting concept as best as they can. So, so I would like to start with the concept first. So it's very important for supply chain professionals that when we are trying to implement the best practices around the globe, but we have to make sure that we also understand what are the true origins of those models and the concept. So triple bottom line as a standard management consulting approach was being introduced by Mr. John Ellington, and the primary driver for this approach was that traditionally many organizations have been entirely focusing on only one dimension, which is the hardcore profit optimization. And that is in true spirit, the core objective of the existing economic structure. And that's how the organizations operate as well. But for in this underlying concept, we not only focus on the profit side, we also consider what are the other dimensions which are equally important, and perhaps if we haven't been focusing on these dimensions in the past, so now COVID-19 as a external factor has clearly exposed all those global supply chains which are not following this concept. And if you were to focus on what is the profit side of it, as you know, that triple bottom line approach covers three elements, which is profit, people, and the planet. And everybody knows how to master the profit side of it. And most of the time, organizations have been focusing on at some level, at a tactical level or at a strategical level, they've been focusing on to how to increase their profits in different economic ups and downs in the different business cycles. As far as people side is concerned, now organizations are realizing that they need to be socially responsible. They cannot clearly ignore the fact that that the workforce for which is working for them, the community in which they are operating, how that community is getting affected. Similarly, the planet side of it as well. Organizations do not operate in silos. They operate in an environment which takes in inputs from the society or environment and conclusively drops the output in the society, thus creating the economic value from themselves. But they tend to forget one key aspect, that if they are some way driving the profit side of it, there is another thing that they are causing an impact into the society, which the economists refer to it as externalities. Externalities, as we define it, is as any third party undue impact which is not taken care of during the profit and loss statement. So what we normally focuses on that, of course, negative externality is one thing and the most important thing to consider. So for example, theoretically speaking, if we all know that organizations in the market operate where there is an interaction of demand and supply. As you can see from the graph as well, this is where the free market economy would like to work, when there is only working on one dimension. But interestingly, they tend to forget when they are only considering one dimension, they are losing focus on what sort of social cost they are contributing to the society. So if they are not taken into account, so that means they are not operating on a socially efficient optimal level. And this is how they tend to, from the theoretical perspective, they tend to induce a net welfare loss to the economy itself. So this is the main part of it, where we see that if they were to take into account the full social cost along with their own cost of production, then in that case, that would be much more socially optimal outcome. So overall, the gist of it from what we get from an overview of the triple bottom line approach is that it's high time that organizations should realize that they should start moving towards socially optimal level of production. If they don't do it, then of course, COVID-19 is one of the primary examples at how it has literally shattered the entire world by shutting down in no time. And so if we don't come to this realization, then of course such unforeseen events will tend to become very frequent. If you were to go a little bit deeper on the how these three elements tend to operate, for example, this is the most important part of it, and of course, we all study all these interesting models, but when it comes to real implementation, we tend to lose focus on that. We all have studied Porter value chain analysis, and we all know that how useful it is when it comes to value, realizing that what sort of value is being created throughout an organization. Now the thing is that if I were to think from the COVID-19 perspective, this is a very common fact that organizations are quite increasingly laying off their existing workforce just to just to maintain their profit line. And of course, that approach is pretty much wholly and solely focused on how to maintain their respective profits. But if they were to think it wisely, how they can really use Porter value chain, then they can realize that okay, that there are other options as well if they were to use it. For example, we all know that that firm structure, human resource management, technology development, procurement, all these important functions have a key role to play. So now if an organization tend to focus on that, okay, we have to optimize, just try to think from a higher level. We have to optimize the cost, and the role of the procurement functions become very pivotal. This function becomes under very huge pressure from the organization that okay, they would have to deliver. But there are other ways around how they can still achieve the same bottom line. For example, if they were to focus on the budgets as well as the spend part of it. So a loan procurement function is not only responsible for maintaining the company bottom line. Each and every function has to contribute in some way or another. Procurement function can only play a crucial role as far as the sourcing part of it. Whereas the budgeting part of it as well, the organizations needs to make sure that they are the same, they should be making the same level of effort for doing the optimization. So what I would recommend when you are dealing with profits versus people part, so you need to make sure that that if you want to maintain the profits, it's not something that the only way out is just to reduce the cost by focusing on the procurement side. You could also achieve the same outcome. Maybe if I were to explain you that the same, for example, if a company said to keep an objective that okay, they wanted to bring in around 20% cost saving. So the same outcome, if same outcome can be brought into that, instead of maybe cutting down their human resource budget by instantaneously laying off the people, that could be one way around. Would be that organization, each individual function should tend to focus around that okay, what optimization, how much they can do the same level of activity by doing things out of the box. And that's how the different departments have the key role to play. And similarly, procurement function can also, I will also try to cover it. Okay, what are the key options, resources, tools available where not many organizations are using it effectively. For example, if I were to give you one example that, okay, one easy way out for organization is to cut down the human resource and just achieve the same bottom line. But if they were to do it through this way, then they are forgetting one important thing, that the same human resource which has delivered in good times substantial out of the box profits, perhaps once the situation normalized, would the same workforce would be available after this initiative? I am afraid not. So then in that case, what are the other options? Because people, organization tend to touch this variable because it's very easy to maneuver, and it's the returns are immediately, you can expect the returns quite immediately. Whereas if all organizations were to adopt, first each and every function needs to see that if they were to cut down, cut down, there are two terms about it. Cut down is just removing the activity, you won't be doing any economic activity. Optimization can be that, okay, if I were doing any economic planning, budgeting through one methodology, I'm sure the technical people can come up with how they can do the same things through many methods. Through this way, the same margins can be contributed by optimization of the budgets as well. Once the optimization of the budget exercise has been in place, and now the procurement function has the clear visibility that, okay, what exactly is in their pocket for which they will be sourcing part, then that the key part the procurement can play. Now, expecting procurement to deliver in isolation may not be as effective if, because organization work when the entire functions are working in an integrated fashion. That's what some of the key models in CIPS that teaches us as well. So instead of choosing the easiest variable of human resource, what I would recommend that if each and every department were to contribute some level of optimization, then the same outcome can be achieved in without even going forward towards the laying off part. The second, the most important thing that I also want to elaborate is the right sizing thing as well. So we all know that, of course, every economics time has certain level of activity associated with it. Now we all see that sales have dropped just because of the COVID-19 situation, and of course companies are forced to either lay off. So there's another interesting part of it as well. I have seen many organizations either diversifying themselves or right sizing themselves by moving or shifting the technically capable resource from one function to another. And this way, the good sustainable organizations are the ones who are making their human resource as all-rounders as compared to just making themselves specialize in one function. And if their workforce is an all-rounder and they can shift in some way or another by moving resource, then in that case, the same outcome of optimization can be achieved without even going forward towards the layoff. So this is how what I see to it is that that's a classic clash or dilemma of classic clash of elements between profits and people. And we can perhaps achieve the same outcome by even not picking up that route as well. In the next part, I will briefly touch that, okay, if once the entire optimization at the budget level has taken place, now comes the crucial part that, okay, how procurement function should effectively work around. So there comes the category management part. So not many people are aware of it as a model, but I would strongly reiterate that they should definitely get awareness or that what are the CIPS category framework in existence. This is the very brief snapshot version that what sort was explaining that how can organization take a maximum value out of it. So the main core objective of category management framework is just to cut down the third-party cost and make sure they are able to increase are able to have a positive impact on the bottom line. The second most important part is that there is, no matter what level of efficiency you are currently working on, there is always a room for improvement. And this is how this model clearly helps you out in achieving that untapped potential. If I were to be starting off with the phase one part of it, where there were that organization, no matter which industry it's belonging to, it needs to focus it around that, okay, is it really aware of it? What is the existing prevailing market situation? For example, are the current procurement manual or the processes are structured in such a way that the buyers are effectively doing the SWOT analysis, the situation, target, position analysis, the stakeholder mapping analysis? Are they framing their business requirement in such a way that the key elements of innovation, cost, service, quality, assurance, and regulatory and technical are being mapped? I'm afraid not. There is still a lot to be improved. What we can focus is around it. what we say, what we need to do is we need to be better aware of it, but in what sort of environment are we working on. The second part of it is being that, okay, through what tools they can extract the value of the awareness part. They can use the internal data gathering part, covering the key elements. They can also do the supply market analysis, where they tend to focus on dynamic segmentation, restructuring, all these key elements. I won't go into detail at what these elements are, but these elements are very, very important in making sure. And as we say in normally in a procurement profession, if you are not aware of the market, you are not aware of how to do the sourcing part. So what I would strongly encourage my peers in procurement world, that it's not how the world is changing with passage of time. You need to be better aware. Normally we used to think that we used to conduct all these analysis based on a yearly basis, but now the COVID-19 has made the overall situation so dynamic that you need to be doing these analysis very, very frequently to stay ahead of the game. As far as the phase 2 part is concerned, what I would suggest that once you have the visibility on the market side, then you can effectively create your own sourcing plan. That, okay, that what sort of strategy, all these three models you need to see that how your portfolio, your supplier perception, your vulnerability involved in one frame of work tends to highlight the focus area where your procurement should be focusing on. There might be, for example, there might be some situation where it might be very economical for you to make stuff within your own premises as compared to outsourcing it. There are a number of sourcing levers which you should be focusing on. For example, volume, specification. Each and every lever has its own respective strategy. And if you are not doing this the homework effectively, then in that case you cannot expect miracles. And as far as the overall bottom line is concerned, as I mentioned in the earlier slide, where the organization will expect a real terms reduction from the procurement function. Similarly, once you reach to the instigate part where you have all the respective ammunition available, then you can do effective tendering process, supplier selection. Of course, all this stuff contributes significantly to the supplier selection part, the transition from contract to supplier management. And normally, as we have noticed as well, we tend to focus more on the procurement side of it. We tend to lose focus on that, okay, once the contract has been in place, that what measures, what steps they need to make sure that the contract management and the supplier management stays in line. If you're not doing that work in line, then you cannot expect that you will be able to maneuver your organization ship in these tough times, because all these things are the basic groundwork that you lay on. So what I would suggest from the key message that I take from this overall stuff, that yes, profit is one dimensional thing that you can do it takes, and what are the tools available which you can effectively use in optimizing your profit side. But at the same point in time, focusing on the profit side doesn't mean you disregard the key elements of people and the planet. And I have effectively shown you that, okay, that how you can reach to the same outcome without even bypassing all those things. So I would like to move to the next part, which is the planet part. And I'm sure the best part of CIPS that I would see to it is that they not only cover the sustainable procurement part, they also enables you to do CIPS ethical procurement and supply certification. Some people take it as a certification. What I were to see it, it's a great source of knowledge where you tend to learn about that, okay, that what are the key other dimensions that you some way or another can, if you were to use those key elements, like for example, sustainable procurement is one part of it. So not many people knows it. So not many people knows about that. What exactly is sustainable procurement? They tend to focus it on that, okay, if we are sourcing the raw material responsibly, that only covers the sustainable procurement part. But you need to understand, for us, what I would strongly suggest, that the procurement policy or the procurement manual should be structured in such a way that the sustainable procurement becomes a part of the way of living of the procurement function. Similarly, this
Sikandar, we can't hear you.
I think it's
Yeah, maybe we give him a minute so he can join back.
Yes. Sikandar, you're on mute.
You need to unmute yourself.
is it visible now?
Yeah, it's fine now.
No, your PowerPoint is not visible, but we can hear you.
Sure. It's fine now.
We can see you, we can hear you, but we cannot see your PowerPoint slide.
Okay. Is it visible now?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe it was some distortion in the internet. So
We can't hear you again, Sikandar. I think you have lost the network again. Sikandar, are you there? Let's wait for a minute. Yeah, he's back. Sikandar, you need to unmute again. We can't hear you.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's fine now.
So I believe there were some issues with the internet.
Yeah.
So you can see the presentation and you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. So as I was referring to this interesting model for reverse supply chain. So our traditional supply chain are structured in such a way we tend to focus it around how our inputs get transferred from to the output part. But if we were to focus on the reverse logistics part, then in that case, we can contribute significantly to the planet side of the objective. So it's not how that, okay, we should only focus on this model, but what I sincerely suggest to all the procurement professionals around the globe that they should make sure that the sustainable procurement part becomes becomes integrated with their normal day-to-day procurement. And similarly, for this thing, I would definitely recommend that the CIPS Ethical Procurement and Supply Certification is one of the great source of information which which all the procurement professionals should be pursuing, because it not only gives you the knowledge, but it also gives you that what are the key good practices which, if to be taken into consideration, can deliver immensely on the planet side of the objective as well. So there are a couple of case studies which I picked it up for the audience. As you know, that the first case study is not hidden from anyone else, because we all know very well that how fragile our supply chains are, and COVID-19 has effectively exposed all the global supply chains, especially those which are not in true spirit following the TVL. If you are focusing on all three key elements, then in that case, the situation, I know many organizations which have been following, and perhaps I will give you some of the examples that how, though there are many examples, but just for the reference purpose, I will try to explain how with very limited resources, they are managed to effectively achieve the same level of outcome. So I move on to my second example, which is the classical example where ENI in Pakistan, they ENI, we all know, is a hydrocarbon exploration production company which has a huge setup all around the globe. In Pakistan, they came up with a surprising initiative. They tend to build a photovoltaic plant. From the beginning, initially it sounds odd for an oil and gas company to set up a plant like this, but their underlying assumption, it seems evident that they not only through setting up this plant, they not only contributed significantly by creating local employment and economic opportunities for the local people, but they also tend to produce uh, the significantly cheaper source of electricity, which is immensely contributing to their bottom line. Similarly, through this initiative, they were able for the entire life, as far as the press releases also as well, that they were also this very a single project is contributing by reducing CO2 emissions like around 144,000 tons. So this seems to be a very classical example that how being an oil and gas company, it doesn't mean that that okay, you should only be focusing on the hydrocarbon side. How you still this is the primary example that how being an oil and gas company, you can still contribute into some way and another to the society, to the country, to the region in some way and another. And second example that I would like to quote is a public sector organization called Pakistan State Oil. Pakistan State Oil, and many people know about it. It's an OMC oil marketing company operating in Pakistan, which has a size fairly large in Pakistan, is a huge market player. But through a number of initiatives, the same oil and gas marketing company, which has through now in recent times, if we know that in Pakistan there were certain ups. The classical point that I would like to highlight in that in recent times, government did certain price fluctuations due to which certain private oil and gas company, they try to hold their stocks just to maintain their profit bottom line. But being a public sector organization, just to ensure that they are able to achieve the build trust upon it, they didn't held back their supplies. They keep doing it, even though initially in the certain period of time it was economically uh, quite not lucrative for them to sell the petrol and the diesel, but still just to maintain their reputation. Now through this initiative, they have managed to earn a quite goodwill in the eyes of the people, and now people are quite focused. And this is how the primary example at how an organization without significantly changing its structure can still contribute significantly to the people part as well. As far as the profit part is as well, they have done a lot of supply chain optimization, and this is how they were able to break their own supply record by shipping more than 255,000 metric tons of petrol from the local port in Karachi. Similarly, as there was an initiative taken by the government of Pakistan as well, where the drive is towards the cleaner fuels. So they have started introducing the Euro 5 fuel, and I believe PSO is the primary leader in introducing the Euro 5 fuel first in Pakistan. So this is the classical example that how any organization can primarily adopt a triple bottom line. It may not need to be a very strategic in line, but in some way or another, you can contribute by focusing on all three elements. And this is how this year, and it's quite remarkable to see that in 2020 PSO profits and the overall the financial outlook has been quite impressive, especially in COVID-19 times as well. So my overall suggestion and the closing note to be to all the procurement professional is that no matter what company you're working for, no matter what organizations you're working for, try to make sure, try to at whatever level that you're working for, try to implement triple bottom line in your daily function. So this is all from my side, and perhaps I would give the lead to the second speaker, who shall be focusing on how the through tactical and operational side to operational optimization you can achieve the bottom line. So that's it from my side. Amir.
Thank you very much, Sikandar. Really very, very useful discussion and insight to the triple bottom line. Definitely some of the things I have picked up. So thank you very much for this. I will now pass on to Mr. Salman Ahmed, who's who will discuss us with the inventory management, profit aspects. So over to you, Mr. Salman.
Thank you, Mr. Amir. And first of all, I'd like to thank Ms. Shafak and all the CIPS team for providing me an opportunity. I absolutely agree with Sikandar that profit is not only the responsibility of the procurement, and all the responsibilities did not come on the procurement shoulders. It is equally responsibility of the other side, other departments, like I'm working in the spares and planning department of my company. So it is equally also my responsibility to look on the profits, to assist the procurement and to assist the supply chain. So basically, when we talks about the profit, normally the organizations actually focus on the profits. They want the minimum stock out for their production. They actually want the maximum production. Likewise, they also want to minimize, at least to keep their minimized spare inventory for the better return on the investment side. And similarly, they want to minimize the man hour, the hours that are expended a lot on the spares inventory, likewise on the maintenance side. So I absolutely agree. And I also have the part of, I think I have the major part of controlling the profits or giving the maximum profits to my company in terms of maintaining the inventory and in terms of giving lots of saving. So how actually my area actually works. The planning is actually act as a epicenter of the whole organization, or we can call the hub of the supply chain, basically, which actually coordinates with the maintenance and the operation department to know about their requirements and to oversee the operations and to understand the functionalities. Likewise, equally to coordinate with the procurement department and fulfilling their requirements for the production side. Similarly, coordinating with the maintenance trade person, obviously that side is from the vendor side, because in the organization, you are also doing lots of service levels as well. And similarly to coordinate with the store side for maintaining at least a better inventory and to letting them know that which spare is critical for the production side and which is the least one. So basically, this act as a hub or as an epicenter of that. And likewise, we also have the responsibility to study the machinery behavior. This is how the workflow of the spare management that actually I do. It actually divided into four sides. The number two sides are the spare identification and spare forecasting that actually comes from the demand planning side. And the last one are the inventory assessment and the optimization. When we talk about the inventory identification, our first responsibility is to register the asset in our ERP systems and then actually identify their spare criticality. And then we actually analyze the bills of the material that we have. And then after that, studying their catalogs and the drawing, we make a final component list. In that list, it contains only those items which are critical to our operations requirement, likewise least critical to our production side. Similarly, in the forecasting side, we do the classification in terms of the quality, lead time, and the cost. Similarly, we do the forecasting in terms of the consumption that we have. Obviously, when we actually want to procure any material from procurement side, we must have some sort of the background in our mind that how much spare has been consumed, what is its functionality, and how well it can affect your production. So therefore, we have to look after these results in the forecasting as well. In the inventory assessment, we actually do the calculation based on our budget given by the company, based on the prices given by the procurement side. We actually set our minimum and the maximum levels in our ERP systems. Mostly organizations these days have SAP in their system, but some still have the other softwares. So we actually do the ABC analysis, we do the calculation. We actually set the inventory parameters depending upon the item consumption, and likewise depending upon the cost of the item. So these all we actually incorporate in the assessment and optimization. Basically, in optimization, we only focus on those spares which are highly critical for the production. And the next slide actually cover about my expenditures that we actually mostly divide our spares. I myself dealing with more than 10,000 line items in my inventory. So definitely I have to look after those critical spares which are mostly related to the CAPEX sites. And they are mostly related to there are 660 items. If I talk about the CAPEX spares, these are those items which you can see in the diagram that they are motor drives or pumps, or we can say that any item which have the life more than 5 years or 10 years. Secondly, the operational expenses, which is actually called the OPEX. It is actually required for running a product business or industrial operations, or we can say that it has the life more than 1 year or less. Likewise, for the profitability, for the cost saving, sometimes our asset get malfunction. For example, a VFD drive or a motor which actually costs for more than 500,000 Pakistan rupees. If it get malfunction, we actually try to repair it within the organization. We try to save it so that we cannot actually procure the new spare for our requirement because it actually costs a lot to the organization. This is actually how in this slide, I am actually telling you about how actually I control the budget, how actually I control the profit of the organization. First of all is to look after the identification. You have to look after the development of the subject of the machinery. You have to evaluate the machinery behavior, likewise the spares, because there are lots of spares currently in the market which are after some years they are getting obsoleted or they are getting changed due to some technological changes. So keeping in view of that, you have to control the asset spares. So as my fellow Sikandar was saying that it is not only the responsibility of procurement, I actually absolutely agree. While we are making the budgets, we have to keep in mind the lead time of any product that we want to procure from the procurement side. And obviously, before making the budget, we actually coordinate with the operation sides and then actually coordinates with our procurement department for obtaining the quotation and the lead time. Likewise, we also check if either this spare is available in our inventory so that we can cut it down to reduce our prices. And the last one is that we actually takes approval from the finance department. And this actually comes when actually procurement give us the final negotiated prices and we give them the go through. the important point is while we are actually working on the planning or the inventory optimization is the material requisition planning. Basically, it is a brainstorming session where I have to ask myself or my team have to ask myself that there are 10,000 line items and what are their current availability, how much they are already ordered and how much we are already like to order in the future, keeping in view of the lead time and keeping in view of the safety stock that we already going to set. So this is how it happened in the MRP side. This MRP is actually further divided into two types. Uh, Normally, we are using consumption-based planning. The consumption-based planning is further divided into three categories, which is the reorder point planning, the forecast-based planning, and the time-phase planning. I am mostly doing the reorder planning because it gives me a sort of some statistics in terms of the consumption-based planning. In that, it actually triggered the procurement department when any stock level reached to its minimum point, and obviously those minimum and the maximum stock levels will be defined by me, and I will actually assess those values, incorporate those value by keeping its view of its lead time, its pricing, its quality, and the cost. So mostly I'm doing this method in my field. The other method is forecast-based planning. We operate in this based planning using the historical values, and the forecast values depends upon our future requirement. And the last one is the time-based planning, which actually represent the data based on the time that actually you require in your planning side. So this is how the whole MRP actually works. As I told earlier that the planning is the hub of all supply chain department, and planning have to cooperate with the operation department, with the finance department, with the vendor side. Likewise, have to check the regular requirements of the plant, and then they actually have to incorporate the planning of the material based on the material consumption. On that, it actually triggers the procurement department through the stores by the purchase requisition, in which the procurement department further raise the purchase orders after having some sort of negotiations with the supplier and taking the approvals from the end user as well. Because while you, in later on slide, I will also cover about the quality inspection of the site, because sometimes there are lots of not as per requirement deliveries, which actually affects the cost of the organization. So planning department in this also have that responsibility to quality check the material, because when you talks about the profit, it means that you may also have the responsibility of the quality checking of the material. It involves the factors which actually I have mentioned in that is the pre-inspection steps. You have to first check the material physically, that the material which actually you have received is as per your order, as per the quantity you already ordered and the quantity you already physically received. It is very important to actually take the photographs of the material for your reporting, because you must actually have the idea of how material physically you have received. And then you have to check the make and the manufacturer and the certificates that actually sent by the supplier. That certificate could be the country of the origin, bill of the landing, or a packing list. This slide is about the value engineering, as Mr. Amir was telling about my major skill in one of my introduction. When we talk about the value engineering, it is about the profit and the quality. It actually talks about both these two things. So it actually focuses on delivery of the product at the best prices. Likewise, it actually also focus not only on the pricing, but also focus on the quality of the product and the functionality of the product as well. Like for example, there are a motor which you actually have procured from Italy, and it is actually taking the lead time of 10 to 12 weeks. While if you source the market, the similar motor with the same specification is available within 15 to 20 days. So obviously you already lost one of your motor, and your production guys are actually wanted to have that motor in your machinery as soon as possible. So for that side, you wanted to have the profit for your company as soon as possible. And for that, you do the value in engineering. So I have actually defined the value in engineering, and obviously that value engineering cannot only done by the planning, it can equally done by the procurement people as well. They can also do the evaluation while they are sourcing any product. If I wanted to raise any requisition of the material, for me, these are the steps which are equally important for anyone if he wants some profitability in his organization. The first one is that any person or must be familiar with his process information. He must be aware of the functionality of the machinery over which the product is going on or its manufacturing. So third one is that he must do the technical evaluation of the spares always. The third one is that he do the planning and proposal and then ask the prices from the procurement. Second thing is that he must focus on the implementation. Like, okay, procurement has given you the cost comparison. You maybe go with the low prices, but before going towards the low prices, it is the responsibility of the planning section side or the inventory section side to make sure that the product which the procurement is going to procure in the low quality or in the low pricing or whatever the quality he has must fulfilling the requirement. I mean, there is an example in my organization that one of my procurement guy actually procured one of the VFD, which actually cost for low, but he did not actually analyze or study the specification of that VFD. I mean, I was requiring the VFD for about 30 kilowatt, and he actually gave me the VFD prices of 10 kilowatt. I mean, so I just told him that, look, don't go for the prices, look the specification as well, which actually I wanted for my machinery as well. So after that, you have to equally focus on the quality. As I already told in my previous slide, the quality inspection is so much important for you because it actually only proportional with your profit as well. And then the performance. And lastly is the cost saving. So when you actually looks on the quality, performance, and the cost saving, this is actually called the value engine. To cut down my presentation because I was being told that I have only few time. While being in the planning, your focus must be on these things which I have mentioned. You must be aware of the capacity planning. You must be aware that what's your organization demands are, what's your organization requirement could be in the future. You must focus on the ABC analysis in terms of the quality, cost. Likewise, you must have the supplier coordination in the market. I mean, you must have the market intelligence because if you have the market intelligence, you can easily perform well in terms of sourcing because you cannot only rely on one supplier. It is basically the risk for the organization, likewise for the procurement as well. So you must continuously source the product in the market by attending the exhibitions, by attending the seminars, and likewise you must know about the product's functionalities. And another thing important is to focus on reducing the obsolete stock because it is actually impacting the total cost of the ownership of your organization. Because since you know that the technology aspects of the organizations are changing every time to time, like the big companies like Siemens, Schneider, Allen Bradley, they are the major OEMs in our Pakistan industry who are carrying out the automation. But at the same time, their product actually get replaced with the technological changes. So this means that my previous stock product is now obsoleted. So I have to work closely with the finance department, with my stores department in existing out those obsolete stock. Another one is the reach of the stock. Obviously, reach of the stock is most important. When any item reach to its minimum point or minimum level of inventory, so the reorder must be done immediately. And for this, you must have the better MRP systems. Nowadays, we have the ERP like in form of SAP S4 HANA or ERP 6.0. And I'm 100% confident that you all are aware of that. So lastly, we have to regularly review the inventory. because the inventory behavior keeps changes. For example, one inventory which is actually called a light or the energy saver, which was consuming for the last 6 weeks around more than 100 times, but similarly its quantity get down. So definitely you will not require for the next year or next quarterly basis. You will be focusing more on as per requirement, and you definitely don't want for the procurement people that they have lot of requisitions, because they are not looking that part. They are just focusing on fulfilling your requirement. So it is a high responsibility on the shoulders of the spares and the planning side to fulfill, to carry on the demand, which is as per the company requirement and which is as per the company profitability. And the last one is that you must focus on the top critical items, which is actually directly based on your production or which actually can affect your production. And in that part, we do the inventory optimization. I have done last year an exercise in my company where actually I classify my items which were more than 10,000, and then further classify the critical items. I make a list of that and then further make their planning orders into the SAP. For me, more important is now matter is the critical items, not those all consumables, because obviously those consumables we can achieve through just-in-time purchases or through pull-based demand, or what it called the smaller order size quantity. So these are all the things which, in my opinion, and we must focus on keeping in view of the organization profit. So that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sikandar, and thank you very much, Salman, for the great insight and the presentation. There are some queries and there are some questions for you. First of all, Sikandar, there is a query from Imran Munir, and he's asking, since the time of collaboration is very high, and deliver some out of the box ideas which might be helpful in longer run. How the procurement person like stakeholder management, where people aren't ready to take ownership or seems all burden from end to end comes on the procurement shoulder. What's your thoughts on it?
First of all, I would like to agree with Imran on this thought that not many organizations, not in procurement function in not many organization is fortunate enough to be the strategic partner in the business part. So as the first and the most important step in this particular thing that a procurement function should be doing is just to make their strategic presence feel to the management. If they are not making it possible, then in that case you cannot expect to deliver something out of the box. Yes, I do agree on this thing that more or less the management has one bottom line expectation. They do not want to focus on the budget optimization part, because that is the tiresome exercise. But as I mentioned it earlier on as well, that no matter how much time does it require, that if your basics are not done, then you cannot expect miracles in no time. So my suggestion to Imran on this thought would be, first of all, make your function strategic presence feel to the management. And the second part can be that, okay, once your end user department are collectively, instead of treating your end user in silos, just sit as a one cross-functional team, see your requirement and try to implement as much as possible that category management to get the best value out of it. That is the only way forward. And perhaps in the earlier stages, where before COVID times, yes, that was not a priority, but now it is no more. It is not. It is something that you cannot no longer ignore to it. If you ignore to it, then of course you become insignificant in the market, and the market is so dynamic, so responsive. Then of course, as I one interestingly recall the concept that is that now organizations are not competing. Now global supply chains and company supply chains are competing with each other. And if your supply chain is not robust and competitive, of course, then in that case, you cannot expect your organization to deliver. So that's my view on the Imran's query.
Salman, would you like to comment on?
Yes, I actually like to certainly comment on that. As Imran said, the people are not ready to take ownerships or seems all burden end-to-end comes on procurement. No, Imran, the thing is that it's not the case really. If you talk about my organization, where I'm actually working, I actually take the ownership of the spares which actually required, as Sikandar was telling about the COVID-19. There was a lot of pressure on our planning side as well to focus on the bulk quantity of the inventory or focus on the bulk quantity of ordering that you required, especially on your consumable spares, because our import is mostly from China. And it was like that the lead time was almost getting doubled due to the COVID-19 situation. So we took the cost of ownership as well, and we actually gave the bulk quantity order, because that order was about to come after 6 months. So keeping in view of our production planning, keeping in view of our requirement and the consumption, we actually gave a bulk order quantity. Similarly, at the same time, we also explore our local market. We assist the procurement department to check the local markets as well for the value engineering, which actually I have explained in my presentation. And so far we have successful, especially I would like to certainly give an example that in our organization there was a machinery which actually used to make a shredded scrap, and that motor was about to procure from Italy, and that order was actually stuck due to the COVID-19. So my challenge was to look the local market. So what I have done is that I take out all the specs, go into the market and talk with the vendors, discuss the problems with the problem which I was facing, and then take their product and give only the maturity that if this product fulfill our requisition or need, then in that way you will get the purchase order. So when we bring that product and install that in our machinery, it actually works. So it doesn't, I don't think so that in this scenario that only procurement person has the responsibility. It is actually responsibility of the planning person to set its minimum and the maximum inventory so that they can actually carry on their operations by keeping in view of the organization profits. Thank you.
I would add something here. Lakshmi had his hand raised. Lakshmi, can you unmute yourself and
Yeah, sorry, Shafaq. You're able to hear me?
yes.
Okay, no, sorry, I raised the hand by mistake. That's an apology. But thanks for an opportunity to speak also. I mean, I'm really amazed by the way the speakers are speaking. I think it's a great momentum for Pakistan actually to speak about such conceptive and innovative concepts. And I think you should be doing more of such seminars where actually sectors from smaller to the larger industries and professionals listening from different industry backgrounds can actually listen to and maybe also get some concepts out of that. I think we should be doing more of this. I'm really surprised and I'm very, very happy with the way you are presenting it. Very, very clear clarity on the concepts, the clear clarity on bringing out what strategies or what hands-on action you are taking on ground, and that's a very, very positive reflector. I just had one question which I raised, since we are talking about manufacturing, and that's an area where I have been working for decades now. So is there any new concept of reducing the P2P cycle times generally in Pakistan? Is there a focus on reducing the P2P cycle time? And if there is, what kind of value levers do procurement try to showcase to the manufacturing or to the management or to the operations team? How do you showcase that as a value driver? And if at all, if there is any, the other part I wanted to know is in larger industries, how do you actually work on more innovative concepts like, let's say, consignment stocks, etc. And knowing Pakistan, which is more or less like India, so when you want to look at reducing the cost of foreign exchange, is there a conscious effort in Pakistan on having a KPI on local sourcing as an overall global sourcing? Is that a KPI? That's the only, that's an interesting thing, if at all, if there is something which you can share. Once again, thank you so much, all the speakers, and good to see my own faces. I mean, friend circles, knowing each of you, Akbar, Salman, Sikandar, Asif, I think it's great to see you all. Thank you so much. All the best.
Okay, I would like to pick up the question raised by my colleague Lakshmi. So Lakshmi, thank you very much, and I would like to answer your question in two parts. First of all, you see, what we have learned from COVID is obviously, you need to mitigate the risk that your enterprise has. So your first question would come out of any organizational enterprise risk management program, whereby they would look at their complete value chain and they will see as to how many SKUs are they currently locally sourcing and what percentage is actually being locally manufactured, because not everything will be locally manufactured. You will have local stockists. So you need to obviously mitigate the risk and spread it across your supply chain. So that could be one KPI as to, the number of items or their value out of your total value chain that you are sourcing locally or they are being manufactured locally. The second part is that obviously, any stock which is part of your P2P cycle, somebody has got to pay for it, either your vendor or yourself or your customer. So the shorter the P2P cycle, the more beneficial it would be for all the stakeholders. I know some organizations who are growing and their working capitals, their inventories and their P2P cycle are reducing. How they have done it, obviously through consignment stock, through engaging with more of their vendors to keep the stocks of their inventory at the suppliers end or at the customer end on account of suppliers. Also, they have looked at challenging the parameters that some of them have been covered by my colleague Salman. Like, you need to reduce your safety stocks or increase the order multiples. You need to challenge on the lead times. You should actually compress your supply chain and ask people to get you what you want within the shortest possible time at the lowest cost. So going forward, yes, the two concepts that you have obviously raised for the teaching of our people and the attendees of this webinar, Lakshmi, I know they are very important, and I hope that we all pick up on that.
Fine. Thank you very much, sir. We have a question from Kamran Bhatt, and he's asking regarding the cost and during this control of cost during this risk-related issues. And people and planet may suffer with lowering the profit. What are the sustainable steps will be essential to create a balance during such difficult phase?
So what I see to it is the basic question is that people and planet may suffer with lowering of profit. What are the sustainable steps would be essential to create a balance? That's a very interesting question. Normally, what I've seen is that for many organizations, the priority that they give to the people element or the planet element varies from one organization to another. So yes, we cannot expect all three elements to be given the preference at the same point in time, and that is the true spirit of TBL. But what what I would suggest in the response to this question is that in the first stages, like I've given some of the examples, you would have to start from somewhere. You would have to show, for example, as far as the people part is concerned, this is a classic example that has recently come up, that even though in case of PSO, it was not profitable enough for them to sell the fuel, though due to the fluctuation in fuel prices, but still they kept doing so, and their objective, and it was a public sector organization which has a core interest in maintaining the profits as well. So their core objective was to make sure that the supply remains the same and there is uninterrupted interruption. Now, for that particular domain, for that particular tenure, the amount of goodwill that PSO earned, to be very honest with you, there is no amount of investment that you were to do in marketing budgets that you can get the same level of goodwill. And now, if I would say, I've seen many public opinions where people prefer to take fuel, even though the fuel prices have gone up. People prefer to take the fuels from PSO outlets as compared to the other competition, just because they feel that this particular company has a very high social connection to it. So yes, you cannot expect that the planet and the people should be given like the same level of weightage. But my suggestion to sustainable in the form of sustainable steps would be to start from the basics. Try focusing on what your current organization existing base can support people and planet, and slowly and gradually, when your organization starts getting the returns, it's not necessary that you need to measure your returns in terms of a dollar value or a particular rupee value. You need to make sure that you measure your returns in some other metrics or some other measures as well. At how many people want to associate with your brand or a product. This can be one of the key elements to it as well. Is your workforce engaged enough or not? Do your workforce really value to love working with you as well? These are the small metrics. So do some people in your local market prefer to work for your organization? These are some of the very small measures or indexes that they can use. But my suggestion to you would be, like, start from the basic and let's see that see the phase where management is accepting those initiatives, and progressively, as you start paying off your efforts with returns, then of course gradually you will be able to implement all three elements through one consolidated approach, like the way we witness in ENI and PSO.
Thank you very much, Sikandar. There is another question from Kamran, and it's specifically related with Salman's presentation. So, Salman, would you like to comment on that?
Yes. Thank you, Kamran, for this very good question and you have asked. The first strategy is to avoid the stock out is that not all the 8,000 or 10,000 line items I want to be in my inventory. I actually look forward for those items which are more critical to my protection. Either they are more consumable or either they are belong to the asset side. So for me is that to always review the inventory consumption, to always check their minimum and the maximum stock levels. And obviously I have to work on their maximum stocks and the minimum stocks, so that when they reach to their minimum point, they can be reordered to the procurement in form of the purchase requisition. So not all the items I will focus on the stock out. The number one is that. The second question which you actually ask is that at the same time minimizing the inventory level. Okay, what I will do is that I will continuously focus on those items which are obsoleted, which are not being used for the last 1 year, 2 year, or not being used for quarterly basis. So what I will do is that I take out their list and then I actually do their forecasting and consumption analysis. If they further required for my company, then I will actually do their planning Otherwise, I keep them in my stock and did not require it for the further. So in that way, my return on investment could be improved. And second most important thing is that whenever uh, any spare reach to its particular stock out, now it's the responsibility of the procurement to fulfill that within the particular P2P cycle or within the particular lead time. I mean, procurement must have taken less time in terms of sourcing, in terms of making the purchase orders, in terms of giving the purchase order to the vendors, because it these days actually add into the lead time, especially in those items which are already available in the market. So my focus will be on to minimize those items which are easily available in the market. We call it just in time. We call the purchases like just in time, or we call those items which are easily available at the shelf. So in that way, I can minimize my inventory, can make better return on investment. Similarly, at the same time, again, I'm saying that responsibility of the procurement to make their purchase order as soon as possible, because in some cases, it has been seen that there are being delays from the procurement side in terms of making their purchase order. That could be due to many reasons. That could be due to some kind of the global crisis like we have the COVID-19. That could be due to if they are not able to find any particular supplier, or the availability of that is not available in the market. So in this way, I can manage my stockouts properly and manage my profits for the better return on investment.
Just one thing to add to what Salman said, sorry. You can also look into possibility of consignment stock if it's a very regular item, right? And if it's you're a strategic supplier or any supplier or a vendor managed inventory, because that will also help you to avoid the stock outs and reduce your inventory. Just thought I'll add this to what Salman said.
I agree with you, Amir Saab, but the thing is that whenever I have seen the contracts with the local suppliers about the bulk quantity, they start actually pressurizing the procurement that when they are going to take these shipment from us, and the procurement guys at the same time told that when we receive the requisition from the plant, we will give you. And suddenly we also received the call from the vendor side that our shipment is ready. Obviously, we want that bulk shipment, but it depends upon our requirement. If already I have stock in my inventory for the 6 months and supplier is pressurizing me for to get that consignment for the next 6 months, I will definitely will ask him to have to wait until my stock reach to the minimum level of the reordering.
Yeah, I agree. There are challenges, and this is just an option to look at.
We have a similar question from Imran Munir, and he's asking, major part of AMRO is spare and major percentage of spares belong to import. Best productive approach is to localize. Do we have any strategy, SOP mechanism for selection of local source, leveraging warranties and sustainable approach to run localization?
Yes, we have that agendas that being set by us because since as I said earlier that our imports are mostly from China and the other countries in the Middle East. So when we actually faced the COVID-19 challenge, the biggest challenge was for us was to now look into the options which are locally available. As I give the example of the motor in my presentation previously, which I told, those motors were already about to order from the Italy, but due to the COVID-19, that order got stuck. So my challenge was right now from my management was to look these motor into the local market. Obviously, the quality was not that up to the mark, which actually we were procuring from the import side. But for the time being, to run our production, we go to our local stockist, not to the manufacturer. as Aftab Saab was earlier said in reply to Lakshman Saab, we go to the local stockist of the motor, take out the specifications and then match those specifications with our needs. In that way, we actually did savings a lot in terms of our productions and the profit.
During COVID-19, we experienced this thing related to the surgical equipments and especially with the mask and sanitizers. There are many local manufacturers who start manufacturing in bulk quantities and is a mega shift related with the imported items. So we need to explore the local options as well as a backup and a backup strategy to fulfill our needs and to fulfill the supply and demand and to balance the situation as a procurement guy, I believe. So there is another question from Ziaur Rahman Shima, and he's asking about how TBL concept can be connected with public sector non-profit organization. Procurement success in public sector somehow is not fully controllable and as per plan.
Very good question. For example, what I see to it from his question is basically he's referring to the NGOs, if I'm not wrong. I believe he has written in the definition of public sector, because they are two separate things. If he's referring to the NGOs part, then in that case, what I see to it is you need to understand the company model. So normally the financial aspect for a profit-making organization is of course the profit part. In case of NGOs, though NGOs itself do focus on the other non-value related objectives, but in some way or another they do have a surplus thing that they normally refer to, if I were to recall my accounting basics. So for an NGO to survive or to maintain a sustainable operation, yes, the underlying concepts pretty much remain the same as far as their core objective is to add value to people surrounding, and to people part. They need to be very well aware how they can contribute to the environmental part. But for them to survive in a long-term perspective, yes, then in that case their cash flows, their donations, they should be in all sort of strategies that they should be running to make sure that they are able to generate at least some sort of surplus for their operations to continue. And if they aren't focusing on all three dimensions in once, then it doesn't, in TBL, it doesn't mean that you tend to focus primarily on the people and planet, you tend to ignore the profit side. TPL simply means that you give priority to all three elements in some way or another so that your operation stays sustainable. So there can be, for example, if I were to recall finance for an NGO, they should be maintaining that though the sophisticated category management model might not be applicable on the NGO thing, but in some way or another they need to see that, okay, which are their primary customers, okay, and where are their expenses lying, and how they can optimize on their expenses. Are there any other options available, alternatives available? Can they diversify their sourcing? There are many tactical and operational things that they can do through which they can add value. So yes, and public sector organizations such as NGOs can in some way adopt TBL. Apart from that, some government-owned organizations, for example, the example that I gave you for PSO. PSO is a government organization with a significant stake of government of Pakistan. So then in that case, when PSO can do it, then other similar government-owned organizations falling in the public sector domain can also do it as well.
We have a limited time slots, and I believe this will be the last question. This is Anonymous who's asking, in the midst of COVID-19, delay in supply of consumable adversely affect productivity in a prolonged time. How possible will it be in determining your max, minimum, or EOQ?
Yes, I would like to comment on that. Basically, the attendee is actually talking about the economic order quantity. Yes, during the COVID time, we have reviewed our inventory, especially the one which were consumables and directly related to our production, because in the steel industry, there are lots of the heavy machinery equipment like crane, and the rope is the critical part which actually lift the steel from one place to another. So when we get the news of the COVID from China and get the news that the shipment will delay, so what we actually did for our next shipment is that we actually did our brainstorming in terms of revising the maximum and the minimum quantity, keeping in view of its lead time. Obviously, it is through the formula. And then actually we call the safety stock. So in that way, we actually did that.
Thank you, Salman. Thank you, Sikandar.
Right. We now end the question and answer session. Thank you very much. There were some great questions. Apologies if your question is not answered. Obviously, you do realize that we have a time constraint and we need to wrap up. Before we proceed further, I would like our chairperson of CIPS Pakistan, Mr. Aftab Khan, to say a few words. If he's...
Yes. Amir, thank you so much. I would want to express my gratitude to my colleague, Sikandar from Karachi chapter and Salman from Karachi chapter. They took the lead and they have delivered very good presentations, linking the triple bottom line with what we really need to do as organizations and as professionals. And thank you, Amir and Akbar, for hosting and moderating. And I would also like to thank all the participants from different countries, especially my worthy colleague, Mr. Lakshmi Narayan, who is a fellow of CIPS, is member of the Global Congress, who participated and who always encourages people within supply chain and procurement professions. So thank you all the participants. Now, obviously, we look forward to more cooperation, more participation, and I believe the next turn would probably be from Islamabad chapter or Lahore chapter to host the next series of webinars. So thank you once again, everyone. And this was a great effort.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aftab Saab. Just on that note, if you can see the screen, CIPS Pakistan has got 3 chapters. Islamabad chapter, Lahore chapter, and Karachi chapter. And you can see in the screen, the members of those particular chapters. So if you have any query, anything you would like to discuss, please contact us and we will be glad to assist. I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. I hope you found the session useful. I would like to thank you, the speakers, Mr. Sikandar and Salman, for their valuable time and insight to the triple bottom line. And at the end, a big thank you and congratulations to CIPS Pakistan team for organizing this successful webinar. Their efforts in making this happen are highly appreciated. And thank you again for the audience for joining us. Key things which I would take from this webinar, by applying triple bottom line method, you can actually increase revenue, reduce energy expenses, reduce waste expenses, reduce hiring and iteration expenses, and reduce our operational risk. So it's been a great session for me. Thank you very much, everyone, and we hope to see you again on the next webinar. Thank you so much, everyone.